I have not done Zoom since COVID.
You're not a professional anymore?
No, not anymore. Let's see if we can share this live. Oh, they're all coming in. Okay. This is now being shown. All right. What's going on? Why can't I share this?
All right. Well, while he's figuring that out and trying to get that lined up, men, thank you for joining us today. And I hope this will be a blessing to you and something that will be helpful and informative as far as tax saving strategies for pastors. Definitely something that I think we all would appreciate to learn from. I appreciate Nate Skelly being with our church, Hillcrest Baptist Church in Eastvale, California, here now for this weekend, Financial Health Weekend. And we had a great time, great sessions yesterday. And if that is something that you would be interested in, I'm sure he would love to hear from you and something to work out in the future. My name's Matt. I'm the pastor of Hillcrest Baptist Church. I've met some of you. I don't know if I've met all of you, but I'd like to real quick, if we can, before we get the session going, if we can kind of just go around, if you're comfortable, kind of introduce yourself. I see Adam over there. Hello, Adam. It's good to see you. And so kind of introduce yourself real quick and kind of tell us where you're at and what church you're at. And then we'll kind of circle back. We'll have a time of prayer and we'll jump right into the session today. So whoever wants to go first, we're all preachers, so just jump in.
Come on, Dad.
Hi, my name is Paul Kang. I'm working on the Hosanna Presbyterian Church in LA. Nice to meet you.
Thanks for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
Adam, just go for it.
All right. I'm Adam Pearlstein. I pastor up in Renton, Washington, Lighthouse Baptist Church. Great to be here.
Jacob Bundy, Horizon Baptist, Camarillo, California.
Thanks, Jacob, for tuning in.
Hi, guys. Good morning. My name is Preacher Jonathan Alaska from International Bible Baptist Church. I'm on the road as well, but thank you, Pastor Matt, for inviting us.
Hey, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for joining in with us.
Yes, sir.
Who else do we got around here?
How's it going, guys? My name's Tim Jolly. I am the children's pastor at Berean Baptist Church in Mansfield, Ohio.
Oh, thanks for joining us, being a part of this. I see some others here. If you guys hear us, go ahead, just let us know. If not, we'll get praying here and get going.
Hey, I'm Damian Jordan here in Lacey, Washington. I'm at the fire at the trampoline place. This is round 2. I've seen these sessions before, but it was so profitable. So here we are. Super noisy.
Are you on the trampoline right now?
I'm not. I'm watching children. So I've got one watchful eye over there and one eye here. I'm all ears.
Come on, man. You got to have your priorities straight. You got to be on the trampoline, listening and watching children. Okay. We got to figure that out next time.
We're going to do this. So yeah,
good to see you, man. It's good to see you. All right. I see Paul. Is that Shannon Scott as well?
Yeah, that's Shannon Scott, I believe. But I think he's on mute.
Okay.
Yeah. He's going to try to, yeah, he's just on mute right now. He said.
That's fine. That's fine. We'll have them if they're able to at the end. So let's go ahead and pray, guys. We'll jump into the session here with Nate. And again, thanks for being a part of this. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for being such a great God. Thank you, Lord, for the opportunities that you give us. And I pray that you would bless this session, Lord, for these pastor friends. And obviously there's some unique terrain that pastors have to cover. And there's some unique strategies, as Nate's going to talk about, concerning taxes and ways to be able to save money. And I appreciate Nate, Lord, and him just kind of finding this niche that's been so helpful for churches and pastors all around the states, Lord. And I pray that you bless this time, Lord, give him clarity of mind, help this to be encouraging, informative, and helpful in the days ahead. And we'll trust you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Nate, go ahead.
All right. Hey, guys. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this morning. It's good to see some other faces here. I didn't know if I'd just be talking to Matt and Nathan here in the same house. We're all in the same house. We're just in different rooms. We thought it'd be a little less awkward to have us on different screens instead of all of us sitting right next to each other for the Zoom call. But I'm glad you're joining us. Really looking forward to this session. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself and kind of where the session's coming from. So I'm a financial planner. I run a firm called Financial Pathway. It's my own business. So my 9 to 5, my Monday to Friday job is doing investment management and financial planning. But I'm out here with Matt and Nathan at Hillcrest this weekend to do a financial health weekend. It's really, it's a ministry that God's really been able to put in front of me to be able to go to help churches, spend a weekend with them, talk about biblical principles about money management, but also some practical help as well. So a few weeks ago, Matt was like, hey, would you be willing to do something for pastors while you're out here? And I said, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to. I know some of you know my dad, Kurt Skelly. And so I grew up in a pastor's home, went to Bible college. So like my whole life has been around ministry, very much in that world of pastor's home. And so I feel like I know as much about pastors as you can without actually being one yourself. And I know that there are some unique financial challenges that face pastors, probably much more complicated these last couple of years with inflation and the stock market dropping and just all the things that we're wrestling with both on a personal side, ministry side, but then also financial side. And in all of that, in those challenges for pastors, there are also opportunities. So last year I spent some time, I conducted multiple interviews with pastors and church leaders, sent out a ton of surveys and just kind of asked pastors, hey, tell me candidly, what are the unique financial challenges that pastors are facing right now? What have you seen in your own life? What have you seen in other ministry leaders that you're close with? And overwhelmingly, this was kind of the theme of the feedback that I got was I started out in ministry and I made hardly any money. So for the first 10 and 15 years, I just tried to keep my head above water, just tried to make ends meet. At some point, maybe when I turned 35, 40, 45, it dawned on me, I need to start doing something for retirement. I need to start planning for the future because in almost every case, pastors had seen the previous generation get to that retirement age and struggle with how to make that exit. And a lot of times not being able to. And so there are a lot of unique challenges. Number one is pay. Pastors' pay in general is pretty low compared to the level of responsibility and education and time that it takes to pastor. So most pastors are on the lower end of that pay scale. Also, a lot of pastors never received personal financial training. Like part of ministry and seminary training really has nothing to do with personal finance, maybe a little bit on the church finance side. But then also, I think the other big complication was, and this is what I heard from so many pastors, is it's really tough to talk to my church about financial matters. Because I want to guard against that perception of being about the money or being greedy or like saying, hey, you need to pay me X number of dollars. You need to help me out in these ways. And so because of those, it presents a lot of challenges. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend a few minutes. I'm going to go through a session that I've recently shared with pastors. Damien, you mentioned, so you were there for that session a few weeks ago when I did this. It will be very practical. I think you'll walk away with at least one good idea for helping you on taxes. I'm also going to leave a few minutes at the end for some Q&A. So I hope as we go through this, if there's things that jump out to you, that you'll either just chime in on the chat or just keep that in mind for that time frame at the end for Q&A. And I'd love to answer any questions that you guys have. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now, and I'm going to pull up these slides. And by the way, guys, if you want these slides, I will share them with you. Just let me know. Drop your email in the chat and we'll make sure to get these to you. So 5 tax saving strategies for pastors. The subtitle there, every pastor needs to pay his taxes. There's no need to leave Uncle Sam a tip. So I definitely think as pastors, we need to be above board in everything that we do. I unfortunately have had conversations with pastors where they kind of almost have like a wink, wink, like, no, this is some income, but it's under the table. And, like, guys, like, as pastors, as ministry leaders, we need to set the right example in being above board in everything that we do. So pay the taxes that you're supposed to pay, but don't pay more than you have to pay. I think a lot of times it comes tax time and the IRS swivels around that iPad and says, all right, time to pay your taxes. And a lot of pastors are opting to add a tip. You know what I'm saying? Like, so pay the taxes that you need to, don't pay more than you need to. So I want to give you some practical ways that are going to help you on the tax front. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Before I do, big disclaimer here. All right. Always consult with a tax professional. So I'm a financial planner, not a tax preparer. So I'm not here to tell you, hey, this is all of it. These things are exactly what you need to do in your specific circumstance. Anytime you're thinking about implementing these steps, it's good to get a CPA, a tax professional to kind of bounce this off of. So it's not tax advice, rather it's just education about areas of potential tax savings. So I just want to make sure I'm making that clear. And I don't want you to just take one thing that I said and just kind of run with it. These are ideas that generally are helpful, but every circumstance is a little bit different. So here's the first one I want to talk to you about. And this is probably, it could be potentially the biggest one of these tax savings. So number one, contribute to a church 403B plan. 403B is essentially the equivalent of a 401k. So secular, regular workplaces that have 401ks, nonprofits are eligible to do 403Bs. In almost every meaningful way, 403B plans are the same as 401ks, but for pastors, there are some very unique exceptions. And I want to get into that here that make it very, very advantageous. So here's where a church 403B plan really helps. Okay, first of all, when you make contributions into the 403B plan, there's no income tax on the contributions. So you do $100 a month, $300 a month, $500 a month from your paycheck. That amount, you don't pay income tax on it this year. Now, normally the way that works is you don't pay income tax now, you set it aside, and then later on, when you withdraw the money out of the plan, then you pay taxes. But again, pastors, it's a little bit different. We're going to get to that. Also, here's another big benefit. There's no Social Security or Medicare taxes on your contributions. So I think you guys are well aware, as pastors, you are considered self-employed for the Social Security Medicare tax. So that means you don't pay 7.65%, you pay double. You pay 15.3%. So think about this. You take, let's say a pastor's in the 22% tax bracket. He contributes $5,000 from his pay into a 403B. He's saving 22% in income taxes. He's saving 15.3% in Social Security Medicare taxes. So almost 40% of his money would have gone to taxes, but now the full $5,000 is set aside for him. So it could potentially be a very big tax savings. Also, there's no taxes while the funds are inside the 403B. So you put the money in the 403B, you invest the money. If there are gains, interest, those are not being taxed as long as it's inside that account. So far, very, very similar to any type of retirement plan. But here's where the big benefit comes in. Housing allowance may be claimed on withdrawals. So the way this works is you put money in tax-free. The money grows tax-free. But then when you go to withdraw, the IRS allows you to still claim housing allowance even in retirement. Even if you are no longer collecting a paycheck from the church, you can still be claiming your housing allowance. So the way that works is, let's say the church says, Pastor, your housing allowance is $24,000 a year, just as an example. And now that you've retired, but the church says, Pastor, your housing allowance is still $24,000 a year. That means any benefit that you're collecting from the church, whether it's now, usually that's a pension. The idea originally behind this was a lot of denominations do a pension, but even on funds that were set aside in the church 403B plan, those are eligible for claiming housing allowance. So think about this. If a pastor's taking out $2,000 a month out of his 403B, that's $24,000 a year. He can claim that as housing allowance, no income taxes, no Social Security Medicare taxes. So it's tax-free going in, tax-free while it's in, tax-free when it comes out. So it's a triple tax benefit. That's far and away better than anything going in the retirement space. It's even better than a Roth IRA, because with Roth IRA, you don't get the tax benefit on the front end. So now you say, Nate, does it have to be a 403B? Yes. This is not, you can't put money in an IRA, or now Roth IRA is already going to be tax-free anyway. It has to be a church-sponsored 403B plan. So this is why when I talk to a lot of pastors, sometimes what's happening is the church gives them some money, and they take that money and they put it in their own Roth IRA or IRA, and they're missing out on a big opportunity. It's good. I'm glad for that. But it would be even better for them if they set up a 403B. Excuse me. So another big benefit is higher contribution limits. You can put a lot more in a 403B than a Roth IRA, regular IRA, Roth IRA. You can do $6,500 a year or $7,500 if you're 50 or older. But with a church 403B plan, you can put up to $22,500 or $30,000 if you're 50 or older. And then get this, between what you put in and what the church puts in for you, you can go as high as $66,000. Now, I know for almost every pastor that you're not going to be getting anywhere close to that limit, but here's where this actually has been really helpful. I've seen several examples where a pastor is getting ready for retirement and he's just maybe 3 years away. He starts putting more and more of his paycheck into the 403B to sort of front load his retirement. And then sometimes the church will do the same. They'll say, hey, pastor, we want to, we want to be a blessing for your years of service. We want to kind of help give you a more sizable gift as you move into retirement. And that's a great way for them to do it, by putting it into the 403B, because then it's tax-free for the pastor. Also, it's a non-ERISA plan. So part of the difficulty a lot of times with setting up retirement plans for an organization, for a business, is that there are so many rules. And you have all these different eligibility rules, and you have to fill out these tax forms. You have to be very meticulous in the bookkeeping. Church 403B plans really don't have any of that. You have the most flexibility. You can choose for the church to offer a match, a flat dollar amount. The church can do this for this person and something else for a different person. They can, the church may say, we're gonna contribute $5,000 for the pastor, but not for anybody else. Like, you have complete flexibility to set it up the way you want. Also, there is no IRS tax form that you have to fill out. The maintenance, the upkeep of the plan is very, very simple. Now, I'm just going to throw this out here. Full disclosure, okay? As Financial Pathway, I do set up 403B plans for churches, and so if that's something you're looking to do, and I can help you out with that, I hope you'll let me know. But there are other places that do these 403B plans: Guidestone, Envoy, Timothy plan. These are several entities that I know of that do church 403Bs. So look into it, explore your options. I'm not really going to plug my 403B service, because obviously I think it's the best, but what else am I going to say? But the benefit to you as pastors is really, really so far and above anything else that you really owe it to yourself, if you haven't done that, to look into that more. Okay. So let's move to number 2. By the way, guys, I can't see the chat, so I apologize if people are putting stuff in the chat. I'll get to that here at the end with the Q&A time. So if you do have a question, just throw it up there, and we'll get to those. Number 2, maximize your housing allowance. So we just talked about housing allowance. Let me just be real clear on this. The IRS allows you to have a certain amount of your paycheck designated as housing allowance. And the idea behind it is it's not regular pay. It's only to offset your housing costs. But a lot of pastors do not know this. The IRS is very clear. Your housing allowance has to be the lowest of these 3 amounts. Because sometimes churches are just like, here's your housing allowance. The pastor's like, cool. All right, great. And they're not really actually aware of the rules behind it. You may not be getting the maximum housing allowance. Now, you may be actually taking more housing allowance than you're supposed to eat too. So it's double-edged sword. So it has to be the lowest of these 3. Your actual housing expenses, the fair market rental of your home, or the designated amount from your church. So in other words, you can look at, okay, here's how much my housing expenses actually cost me. And by the way, there's a list. The IRS has a list of what the eligible expenses. You can't just go and buy new furniture and be like, well, that was a housing expense, so that's that's part of my housing expenses. Like it's delineated. Or fair market rental, what you could reasonably rent the house out for, or what your church designates. So here's what I've seen before. Sometimes the church says, Pastor, your housing allowance will be $12,000 a year. Cool. But your actual housing expenses and the fair market rental are a good bit higher than that. So if that's the case, then you should go to the church and say, hey, can you bump up my housing allowance? Because it's not going to affect the church at all. I mean, the church is sending you the exact same amount of pay. It's just how much is salary, how much is housing allowance. So you want to get the most possible for that housing allowance amount. Now, conversely, if the actual housing expenses or the fair market rental are lower than what the church is designating, then you do need to adjust that down. Is the IRS ever going to come knocking on your door or send you a nasty letter? Probably not, but you just don't really want to get in trouble. You want to follow the rules to the best of your ability and make sure that you're going right up to what you can, get the maximum that you're allowed on housing allowance. Also, your church should provide you a letter. So if you don't have something in writing, go ahead and get that done. If the church says, hey, Pastor, your housing allowance is, whatever, $20,000 a year, and they just told you that, ask them to just put it in a letter. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just something in writing in case there was ever a question, you have that documented. The housing allowance is subject to Social Security and Medicare taxes. So you do have to pay the 15.3% on it, but you don't have to pay income taxes. So I want to be clear on the difference there. So it helps you on income taxes, but you still do have to pay the Social Security, Medicare. But claiming housing allowance could save you thousands of dollars in tax credits each year. Damien, there was a pastor a couple of years ago when we did a session at your church that he just didn't know. He didn't know that housing allowance was even a thing. So, I mean, if you're not claiming housing allowance, by all means, and you're able to, please do. As long as you're a licensed or ordained minister and the church doesn't already give you free housing through a parsonage, then look at housing allowance. Let me just say a quick word on Social Security and Medicare. Because I feel like this may come up in our Q&A time. It's not one of the things I was planning to talk about. You only can opt out of Social Security within the first 2 years of your ministry. Once that window is passed, you can't opt out. I always recommend to young guys, don't opt out. I've talked to a lot of people who have opted out, and almost to a person, they're like, I wish I had not. There are so many more benefits to Social Security besides just a check in retirement. So this is not something I was planning to go into. I won't go down that rabbit trail, but I would just say, hey guys, my opinion is pastors should not opt out of Social Security. Also, if we want to be real technical, you're supposed to, if you're going to opt out of Social Security, it's supposed to be because you are principally objecting to public assistance from the government. And I don't think that applies to most pastors. So just my 2 cents there. Okay, let's go to number 3. Oh, if my slides, well, there we go. Okay, they just froze on me for a second. Set up an accountable reimbursement plan. This is another area of opportunity that I think a lot of pastors are just not as familiar with. I talked to a pastor and his wife a few weeks ago, and they said, hey, we're kind of struggling here because our church pays us, and they pay us a very reasonable salary. But every time they want to do something for us in terms of like a benefit, they just bump up our pay. They're like, oh, okay, so you have health insurance that you have to pay for out of pocket, and we can't offer you health insurance, but we'll give you, X number of dollars a year to help with that. And then there was something else. Like maybe it was like travel expenses or gas, or, so we're going to give you a little bit extra money. But every time they bump up their pay, then a good chunk of that comes out in taxes. So it's not the most efficient way. So let's say you as a pastor, like, hey, how can I increase my compensation from the church without adding to my tax bill? This is a great way. So maybe if the church comes to you and says, hey, pastor, we're thinking about next year and adjusting your pay and trying to pay you a little bit more, instead of bumping up the salary, you may want to consider instead setting up an accountable reimbursement plan. Because we all understand that as pastors, there are certain expenses that you may incur throughout the year personally that are ministry related. You go to a conference, you travel to visit people in the hospital or at their home, you buy books, you get, so just a lot of different resources that you may take advantage of that you're paying for out of pocket. So here's how the accountable reimbursement plan works. The church will budget an amount that they're willing to reimburse the pastor for those eligible expenses. So they say, okay, pastor, we're going to set it up. It's going to be $4,000 this year. And all you'll do is, as you incur those expenses, you keep the receipts, send it into the church, and just document, here's what it was for. And then they'll reimburse you. And I would say probably on a monthly basis is how you want to set that up, or maybe quarterly. You definitely don't want to do this to where it's like every time you get a receipt, here, church, pay me back $6.60 for this toll that I just went through. Like, aggregate them and do them periodically. And then the pastor is able to be reimbursed up to that limit. Now, keep in mind, guys, it's a use it or lose it system. So if the church budget's $4,000, but you only submitted receipts for $2,000, then you get $2,000 and you don't get the extra $2,000. Okay. They don't just like, oh, okay, here's a check. So to use it or lose it. But the great thing is none of that is taxable because it's a reimbursement. It's not pay, it's paying you back for something that you already paid for. So that's a way that, again, pastors can increase their overall compensation. So the church is actually helping you. You are being paid more, but it's not adding to your tax bill. Now, I know a lot of pastors, instead, the church says, hey, here's the church credit card, and you just use this for expenses. And that will work too. So, you can go about it either way. Maybe a small benefit of doing it this way is if you want to use your personal card to get the points and rewards yourself and then being reimbursed. But either way, I'm not here to say one way is better than the other, but just I know some churches do it that way. Okay, number 4, track your mileage. This is another opportunity that, again, I think a lot of pastors are not always taking advantage of. Now, Matt, you and I were talking here this weekend. Your situation's a little bit different because a church member donated a vehicle to the church. You're able to use that vehicle for church-related things, and then the church can just pay for the gas and maintenance for that vehicle. So that makes it kind of simple. Not every church, most churches don't have that arrangement. So if you're using your vehicle for ministry-related purposes, then you can track that mileage and get reimbursed for it. So again, reimbursed, not taxable. So it's an extra benefit to you that you're not adding to your tax bill that way. So for instance, all right, for 2023, federal mileage deduction is 65.5 cents a mile. So let's say in a given week, you went and made a hospital visit, you went and visited a church member in their home, and then you drove, let's just say in a given week, you drove 100 miles for ministry related things, you would be reimbursed $65.50 for that. Now it has to be for business purposes. So if you drove to the grocery store, if you dropped the kids off at school, that doesn't count. Also, it doesn't include your commute. So unfortunately, driving from your house to the church can't be included. But if you're in a context, if you're in a place where you do a lot of that, if you're doing a lot of driving and ministering and visiting for those types of things, if you drive to a conference, if you drive to a speaking engagement, all of those can be reimbursed expenses because they're for ministry, for business purposes. And again, it's not taxable income. Now, some churches will give like a gas allowance or car allowance. If that's the case, then that replaces this. So you can't double dip. If the church is saying, hey, we give you a gas allowance, we give you an allowance for a car, you can't also then say, okay, well then also reimburse me for my mileage. But if you don't have an arrangement like that, again, it's a great way. That can end up being another couple $100 a month in reimbursed expenses for mileage. And again, not taxable income. Okay. If you want to track your mileage, here's some apps that you may want to consider. I definitely don't recommend trying to do it on a piece of paper because that's probably not going to end well. So if you want to track your mileage, just get an app. Here are a few that I looked up. I'm sure there's others out there. And then that way you're keeping an accurate record, because again, you just want to keep records. You don't want to just say, hey, church, I drove 373 miles this month. Trust me. So you want to have something that actually records those things. Okay. Lastly, but certainly not least, apply for health coverage through healthcare.gov. This is a big one that I've seen. I've talked to a lot of pastors that are using health sharing ministries, and that's fine. That can be a good option, but I think before you look at health sharing ministry, you need to look at healthcare.gov, and I'll explain why. By the way, guys, every pastor needs to have health coverage of some kind. Please do not tempt fate. Please do not roll the dice with your personal health, your family's health by saying that's too expensive. I'm just not going to get it. We've all seen it. We've all seen those circumstances where a pastor had some kind of catastrophic health event, didn't have health coverage, and now they're struggling, and their families, putting together a GoFundMe, and and obviously as a Christian community, we need to rally around people. But man, wouldn't it be better if we all took some precautions and put those things in place to make sure that health coverage was there, so that we don't end up being a burden on others to take care of those things when they happen. So here's how this works. If you don't have health insurance through your job or through your spouse's job. So by the way, guys, if the church doesn't give you health insurance, but your spouse has health insurance, then you have to go through their job. You can't do healthcare.gov. But most pastors don't have health insurance through their job or spouse's job. So if that's the case, then you're eligible to go to the healthcare marketplace, healthcare.gov. Now, depending on what state you're in, it may take you to a state website. Some states it takes you to healthcare.gov and you do the federal, you go through that. Some states it'll take you to the state website, but it's the same program. It works the same way. So what you do is you'll input all your information. Here's where I live, here's my family size, and then here's my income, or at least you estimate your income. You say, here's what I think I will make in this coming year. And then based on that information and based on your state, they'll say, okay, there's different tiers. So the first tier, the bottom tier, is if you're up to this certain number, and it's usually a pretty low number, you will qualify for Medicaid, which is free. So you get free healthcare coverage through the Medicaid program. If you're in that second tier, about here, then your kids will qualify for CHIP, which is a state-run program that's, again, free healthcare for your kids. And then you and your spouse would get your own plan through healthcare.gov. So you would get a plan where you pay a monthly premium, but the kids would have free coverage. If you're above those two tiers, the next tier is where you would qualify for a tax credit. This is probably where most pastors land, but it really depends on what state you're in. So if you're in the Northeast, if you're on the West Coast, a lot of pastors are qualifying for Medicaid or for CHIP because the limits are higher. The standard of living is so much higher. Those that are a little bit more in the heartland of the U.S., maybe in the South, they're probably eligible for that third tier where they get a tax credit. So what happens is, what the healthcare marketplace does is say, okay, your income qualifies you for a $600 a month tax credit, let's say, and you can look at all the available health care options. And let's say you find a silver level plan that's $850 a month, which normally that would be like, yikes, that's kind of out of my reach. But with your $600 a month credit, that offsets. And so it only costs you $250 a month for this plan. Now, keep in mind, what you have to do is you have to tell them, here's what I think my income is going to be. At the end of the year, when you do your taxes, then you settle up. So they say, okay, you told us you were going to make X number of dollars. So we gave you a $600 a month tax credit. Okay, how much did you actually make? Was it less? If it was less, cool. We'll actually give you a bigger tax credit. We'll give you more money. If it was more, okay, maybe we need to take some of that back. So when you're estimating your income, you want to be probably a little bit on the higher side if you can, because it's not fun to go, to report later. And then they're like, oh, well, you said you were going to make a lot less than you did. And now we need to take some of that back. Let me go to the next slide here. I don't know why this is, here we go. But here's the big thing, guys. Okay. You do not, notice that second bullet point, you do not include your housing allowance as part of your income when applying for coverage. Okay. So I don't want you to miss that. So when you're going in there and you're putting your income, maybe the church pays you $70,000 a year, but your housing allowance is 25. So you don't report 70, you report 45, which probably puts you farther down in those tiers, maybe get you free coverage or at least a much bigger tax credit, because the higher your income, the lower your credit. And then once you're above a certain level, you get no tax credit. You're on your own. You pay the full price. So almost every pastor is in one of those 3 tiers, but by not including your housing allowance, that ends up being a big savings. And I've seen this several times where pastors didn't know that they were reporting their full compensation but by adjusting it and not including their housing allowance, all of a sudden they just saved themselves $200 a month, or maybe they went from paying a monthly premium to paying no monthly premium because now it's free. And very often pastors can get excellent health coverage at a much lower cost than health sharing. Again, health sharing is fine, but I talked to a pastor. He was paying $560 a month for health sharing. I said, go to healthcare.gov, fill out the application. Tell me what it tells you. He ended up getting coverage for his family. He has several kids for $160 a month. It was huge savings. So you need to check it out. Unfortunately, you only can apply at the end of the year during open enrollment. If you have a change, if you have a new baby, you move to a new house, then you get a special enrollment period, and then you can apply for coverage during the year. Otherwise, you have to wait until November when that open enrollment season starts. The other thing about health sharing plans, though, is it's not health insurance. So they don't cover pre-existing conditions. They reimburse you, meaning you got to pay for it all up front, and then you got to file all this paperwork, and then you're waiting months for them to get you the money back. It's better than nothing, but man, I would tell you, try to get healthcare.gov coverage if at all possible. And then if that's just not reasonable, then look at a health sharing plan. Okay. All right. So I think that is just about everything I wanted to talk to you about on those 5. Let me give you a couple of additional resources. By the way, guys, again, I'm going to send this to you. If you want these slides, I'll send it to you. No problem. Guidestone 1040 tax calculator. If you'll Google that, great tool. If you want to kind of see what your taxes are going to look like, it's probably the best tool I've found for estimating your taxes. Pastor's Wallet blog is a wonderful site. Lots of great articles on pastor specific financial topics. So if you like some of these, there's a lot more of those types of things on Pastor's Wallet. And then I'll mention my own podcast, Financial Pathway Podcast. If you like listening to podcasts, I hope you'll check that out, because I do a lot of practical, but also some spiritual, topics on finances and a lot of things related to ministry, several interviews with ministry leaders. So I think that could be a good resource to you. So let me go ahead. I'm going to exit out of this if I can, if it'll let me. I don't know why my screen seems to have frozen up on me. I can't seem to exit out of this. So Nathan or Matt, I don't know if you can let me know what questions are in the chat. I can't go to the chat right now. But if there's any questions, or if you can, there we go. Now I'm out of it. Okay. Let's see here. Anybody have a question? Something they want to throw out?
I think there are 2 questions in the chat, one by Damien and one by Tim Jolly.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see?
Okay.
Yeah.
Damien, if I roll over a traditional IRA into a church-sponsored 403B, is that a taxable event? Great question, Damien. If you have an IRA that you contributed to while you were in ministry, yes, you can roll that into a 403B. So think about this, guys. Let's say you were contributing to an IRA for many years. Currently, that's going to be taxable for you when you retire one day. But as long as it was from ministry income, you can take that, put it into the 403B, roll it in. It's not taxable. And now you get to claim housing allowance from it later on. So if that scenario applies to you, absolutely, that will save you thousands and thousands of dollars doing it that way. So good question. And then Tim, how would we assess the fair market rental value to compare actual fair market value designated? That unfortunately the IRS doesn't give us a lot of specifics around that. I would say you want to, like for me, I would just pull up Zillow. I would enter in the parameters for houses that are same number of bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and just kind of see what is listed, and use that as my basis. So, but yeah, what you're going to find, guys, is the IRS tax code is not as black and white as a lot of people think. Like I've talked to several different CPAs, like there's certain things that you ask one CPA and they're like, no, it's this. Then you ask another CPA, they're like, no, that's it. It's this. So like, there's a lot of things that are still kind of up for interpretation. And what I would always tell you is whatever your tax professional tells you, go with it, because they're the ones that are on the hook for that advice. So if you say, hey, I'm abiding by my tax professional's guidance, if that ever becomes an issue, then you're not bearing the brunt of that. You can refer them to say, hey, here's the advice that I got, and this is why I did it. So, okay, so let's see here. Did you say we can add to the 403B ourselves, or does the church need to make contributions on our behalf? Either one. You can contribute out of your paycheck. The church can contribute directly for you, one or the other or both. So however you want to set that up. Some churches, they just say, hey, we're going to do $5,000 a year to our pastor. We're going to do $400 a month. Some churches, it's just the pastor takes some money out of their paycheck and the church doesn't contribute at all, or you can do both. So federal solar tax credit. We've seen many pastors able to claim that 30% in its entirety. I haven't run into a lot of solar tax credit. I'll be honest, Damien, being over on the East Coast, it's not as prevalent for solar panels. So it's just not something I've had a lot of experience with, talking to people about the EV or solar panel tax credits. So Matt, how do we get a 403B opened? It must be church sponsored, correct? What would be fees, maintenance for opening 403B with you? So I can speak to a couple of these. Getting a 403B open through me is a very simple process. First thing is you set up a plan guide, which is just to establish the plan for the church. So it's just filling out information and sign. And then each person that's going to participate fills out their account application. And then once a month, you would go in, or the financial secretary, whoever's going to be overseeing that, and would sign into the portal, enter, here's how much money is going into these accounts from the church bank account, which is already linked, and then submit. Nothing else. No yearly form, no yearly rule or what's the word I'm looking for? No yearly rules as far as like looking at is everybody's account being contributed to fairly and all that. There's none of those rules apply. In my case, the fees, the church doesn't pay any setup cost. The church doesn't pay any ongoing cost. The bookkeeper custodian, which is Aspire, they do the record keeping and handle like the actual account setup. They charge $40 per participant, and then they charge 0.15% of the account balance. I, as the investment manager and your point person to help you get everything set up, and your ongoing support is 0.5% of the account balance. So like for a $5,000 account, it works out to be about $72.50, I think, a year. But those just come out of each person's account. So the church doesn't pay an upfront or ongoing amount. The fees just get deducted from the individual's accounts. Other 403B providers usually have either a setup cost or an ongoing cost, usually in the range of $500 to $1,000 is usually what I've seen. And then other fees may vary. So each provider is a little bit different. The reason I started providing 403Bs is I realized a lot of smaller churches, it was cost prohibitive for them because it was one pastor, maybe two, that was going to be using it. And they were like, this seems kind of steep. for the amount of money that I'm putting into this plan. So as far as I know, the 403B plan that I do is the lowest cost and simplest process that, again, I know of. Damien asked, do you do tax preparation for pastors? Do you have a recommendation for that? I don't do tax preparation. There are some folks that I know of that do tax prep for pastors, but those are kind of limited. I really wish I had like 2 or 3 great people that do pastors' taxes that I could just be like, yep, just talk to this person. Unfortunately, those are few and far between. So if you all have somebody that does your taxes and that's knowledgeable about pastors' taxes, please feel free to share with the group, because that's always a need. Yeah. Good. These are great questions. Anything else, guys? Going once, going twice. Well, hey, Matt, I'll turn it back over to you then. I appreciate you guys taking some time to be part of this call. I love doing this. I hope it was helpful to you. I will, again, throw your name and email in the chat if you want me to send the slides to you, and I'll be glad to do that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nate. Definitely informative, and I appreciate that. I've got a lot of notes here, and I'm sure you do as well. And this is recorded, and so you can go back and listen to that if maybe you missed something or something to add there. But we appreciate you doing a lot of research on this and helping us out. And like you said, if you'd like those slides, please put your info there in the chat, and he'll make sure to get that to you. So let's go ahead and pray, and we'll call it for today. And hopefully we can do more of these in the future. Oh, and if you have any desire to talk to Nate, as far as reaching out to him and stuff like that, Nate, what would be the best way to contact you?
Yeah, I'll put my email and phone number in the chat here, guys. So if you want to contact me directly on any of this stuff.
And pastors, if you'd like to have Nate in, reach out to him. He was definitely a blessing to our church. We had quite a few of our people text me last night saying that was so helpful. And so definitely take advantage of that if you're able to. Let's pray. And we'll call it. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you again for this time. Lord, thank you for just the information here, and appreciate Nate doing a lot of research on this and trying to be a blessing to us pastors. And I pray that, Lord, you give us discernment as a pastor to figure out what is the best option, and talking with our leadership team, Lord, at our churches, and figuring out which direction we need to go, and being able to be wise stewards of the money that you've given us, Lord, so that we can, Lord, be better used for you, be able to be better as far as our giving into the Lord's work, but also, Lord, just being wiser with being able to provide for our families, which I know is a desire for all of us. Lord, bless our week. Help us to be a witness and testimony for you, and we'll trust you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, guys, so much for tuning in. We'll talk soon.
We'll see you all.